All right, guys, thank you. Thank you very much for all the love and support. Thank you very much for watching my previous videos. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are located. Thanks again for watching this video. And I hope that you are taking all the precautions, you're keeping safe, you're keeping yourself and your family also safe in these special situations nowadays. Today, we are going to talk about another interesting topic in Salesforce, but this is not directly concerning Salesforce. Rather, we are talking about Salesforce Einstein Analytics Cloud. As you know, setting up integration between the Salesforce core with external system is quite a common practice. We have done that many times. We know that we have that capability. We have those kind of APIs, so it's quite common to integrate Salesforce core to external services using REST API, SOAP API, platform events. We have different kinds of integration, different kinds of patterns, and we are not going to dig deeper into that. But today we are going to talk about another way of uploading or inserting, updating data in directly into Salesforce Einstein Analytics without even involving Salesforce core. I have seen many projects, uh, people pushing data first into Salesforce core and then fetching the data indirectly into Einstein Analytics. There is nothing wrong in that. It really depends on what are you trying to achieve and what are the implications and applications. But it is also possible to directly push data into Salesforce Einstein Analytics Cloud without even involving the Salesforce core, thus saving your space, money, storage, and licenses. So we are going to use a SOAP UI today as our client application, and we are going to see how Salesforce and Einstein Analytics works in general, and how can you set up integration between your client application and Salesforce Einstein Analytics Cloud. Okay, so let's move forward. So let's first try to understand how things work in general. So in this diagram, I'm giving MuleSoft as an example, but you can replace MuleSoft with whatever you have. I'm just trying to demonstrate that any integration platform could have been used here, but in the interest of making this diagram a bit more visual, I have used MuleSoft logo. But you can imagine any integration platform, as a matter of fact, can be used in the whole scenario. So it's quite simple. So your integration platform is going to get or retrieve all the relevant data from the data source. In this case, we are simply showing a data warehouse using SQL. MuleSoft is going to retrieve the data from the source system. MuleSoft is going to prepare the data in a format that Salesforce is expecting. And when I say Salesforce, please understand we are talking about Salesforce Einstein Analytics Cloud. So I'll just reference it as Salesforce so that I'm not mixing up words. So after the data preparation is done, after the data retrieval and data preparation, the next step would be to push those data in Salesforce. And here is a interesting part. In Einstein Analytics Cloud, when you push a CSV file, you also have to specify a special JSON formatted file, which we called as metadata JSON. So we call it as metadata JSON. I'm just going to call it as MD JSON to reduce the complexity of this pronunciation. So you have to provide the MD JSON file with the CSV file. So CSV file will contain the data, but MD JSON file is going to contain the structure. It defines the structure of the CSV file. It is going to give the metadata information about the CSV file, as in how many columns you have, what's the name of the each column, is the column a unique key column, what's the data type of the column. So we're going to see how it looks like, but that's what MD JSON file does. So you have to provide a combination of CSV file and MD JSON file to the API, and then Salesforce is going to process the data based on the information provided in the MD-JSON file. All right. It is important to have this MD-JSON file because, for example, if you have to ensure that the data type of the column is correct in Salesforce, then this MD-JSON file would be required so that the runtime engine can read the file and then process the data accordingly in Salesforce. Now, this is a recommended step. providing an MD JSON file. It's a recommended step. It's not a mandatory step because Salesforce automatically generates that. Even if you try to upload a CSV file um, using the user interface, if you create a dataset in Einstein using a CSV file, Salesforce automatically does that, right? So you don't have to provide the MD JSON file as mandatory step, but to have more control, to have more flexibility and agility, it's important that you take control and do that. So I'll show you how it looks like in Salesforce. So this is my Salesforce UI, which is the Einstein Analytics Cloud. I click on create, I click on dataset, and then you have to click on CSV file, and here you select the file. Now my file is selected. I click on next, and here you can see that it has automatically generated this data schema file, which is sample data.json. This is a metadata.json file, which I was just talking to you about. And if I download the file here, let's see. Yeah, so this is how it looks like. This is the downloaded metadata.json formatted file. It's not properly indented, but you know the drill is that whenever you try to create a dataset using CSV, it is automatically performed by Salesforce. So that's an optional step. Yeah, so I'm just going to cancel this because we are going to do the same using integration. Sorry, uh, we will just cancel this step. All right. So going back to my PowerPoint, so this is, I think we are quite clear here. Going to the next step. So what is the high level process? How do we use integration? How do we use the API to push data in Salesforce? And this is the high level step which will be followed by all the integration platform. Even if you make your own client application, it's going to use the same pattern, same flow, you know. So it always starts by query data from external source, which we have done already in the previous slide. Then we prepare the data. We prepare the data in CSV format based on the Salesforce specifications or whatever your need is. You use your requirement to create a template of the CSV file, and then you have to use that template to create a data that Salesforce requires. Then optionally, you have to prepare that metadata.json MD.json file. You have to log into Salesforce always because you have to get the valid session ID. Then you have to insert a very special object called insights external data. So we will talk about this object in detail going further, but insights external data is the object that is used in the background by Salesforce Analytics Cloud whenever you create a data set. Then there is another object as well called insights external data part. Both of them are connected. So insights external data is the parent object of insights external data part. So insights external data acts as a header object, and the insights external data part acts as a child object where you also supply or input your information as in the data file information. Yeah, and then you finally close the job, and then you have to verify the results in the Salesforce UI, which is the Salesforce Einstein Analytics Cloud UI. So coming back to the UI, for people who are not aware of the UI, the setup option to view the jobs and the data flow in Salesforce Einstein Analytics Cloud is here, Data Manager. So you click on Data Manager, it opens a new tab, and here you can see all the jobs that have run in the last 7 days and the last 24 hours. You can also see how much of the jobs are remaining in the last 24 hours, and here you can see the data flows that have run or that are available in the org. Okay, so what we are going to do here, if we go back to the slide, it says that first of all we need to get a valid session ID, right? So I'm going to open my SOAP UI, and I have already imported my enterprise WSDL in SOAP UI, and I can see all my core API calls here, right? So right from change on password to describe calls to query calls, get deleted, query all, retrieve, reset password, send email. So all the core API calls are available here. Since I have imported the WSDL, which stands for Web Service Description File. So I have downloaded the WSDL from Salesforce API. Go to setup and go to API and download the WSDL. So I have already downloaded the WSDL and imported in my SOAP UI system. And this is how I look. This is how this is what I see um, when I import the WSDL. These are the list of the core APIs. Okay, so first of all, I need to make a login call, right? So let's go to the login call here. So this is the login call, and this is the request. So I have already prepared my username and password. So this is my username, and this is my password concatenated with the security token. And this is the endpoint URL, login.salesforce.com/services soap u49.0 is the version number. Right, so this is the login. So we in the last video, if you remember, we used REST API username password based flow, but here we are going to use SOAP API login call, and for that we are using SOAP UI. So I'm simply going to click on this arrow, which is submitting the request to Salesforce server. Salesforce server is going to verify my username and password, and then if everything goes well, Salesforce is going to return a valid session ID and also return other details like server URL and the details of the user record as well. So let's see how it looks like. So I click on this, and now you can see that we have the response. We have many important details here. We have metadata server URL. We have the server URL, which is the endpoint where your API calls should be redirected to. We also have the session ID. We also have the user details, as in who invoked this API process. All right, so we are only concerned about these two important parameters, server URL and session ID. So let's copy this session ID in a notepad so I can simply use that whenever it's needed. So I'm going to copy this in a notepad. Yeah, let's keep it here. And I'm also going to copy the server URL, though it's not needed because I think I already have it, but I'm anyway going to keep it for my reference. So this is the session ID, this is the server URL, right? Now, since the login process is done and we have the session ID, I think we can simply uh, close this window. We don't need this anymore. Okay, so now the first step, as we saw in this slide, it is done. The second step is to insert Insights external data record and populate necessary values. Okay, we are going to do that. So let's see. I'm going to create, which is the API core API call, which is going to insert that record in Einstein. So I open this. Here you can see that in the session header, I have to pass my session ID, right? So I'm simply going to copy my session ID, which is this one, and paste that session ID in the header here. So we have copied our session ID in the session header, and the server URL, which is this one, it's also copied here. And this is the exact endpoint of my org where this SOAP API is going to hit the request using this session ID. And in the create tag, we have to supply the S object detail. And as I said, the S object is called Insights external data. Now, if you go back to here, which is the API reference document, in here you can see that the Insights external data object has many fields. So I'm not going to walk you through with all the fields. Rather, I'm only going to show you the fields that I have used, and I have used all the mandatory fields, in fact, to create this record. So let's go back to my SOAP UI. Here we have to supply the type, which is the name of the subject. Then we have edgemart alias, which is the name of the data set. Edgemart label can be the label of the data set. Edgemart container is the name of the application. Now in Salesforce Einstein Analytics Cloud, I have already created an application. So if I go to all items and if I go to apps here, I have already created an application called integration datasets. All right. So I have used integration datasets as the app name here. Then the format is CSV. Operation, I have chosen upsert for this demo, but we do have many other operations that can be used. For example, we have let's see, operations is, sorry, yeah, so here is the operation. So we have multiple operations. We have append operation, which means to add data to the existing data set. Delete is to delete. Overwrite is to change the entire data set. And upsert is a very special case because when you upsert, it checks if there is a uniqueness. If you have a unique ID, Salesforce is going to match your record with a unique ID. If it exists, it is going to update that row. Otherwise it's going to create a new row in the data set. So since it's a special case, I have used upsert operation for this demo. All right, so let's go back. So upsert status is new always when you start. Action is none in the beginning, but this action is a very important field. We will see how. Then we have notification sent. I am only sending notification when it is failure. And then we have notification email, file name, description, and this last field is called metadata JSON. So if you remember, we were supposed to create a metadata JSON file because we need to supply the metadata JSON file with the CSV file as well, right? So here I have already created the metadata JSON file manually because I also wanted to learn. So this is how my JSON file looks like. So it is based on the CSV file. So we have a name column, we have age column, which is number, we have gender column, which is text, we have country of origin column, which is text, we have a unique ID column. So is system field is true and is unique field is true, type is text. And then we, for example, we have a multi-column just for the sake of example to show how multi-columns are inserted. So I have already created this JSON. So I'm going to copy this JSON and I'm going to paste this JSON here and click on JSON to base 64. I'm going to copy the base 64 and let's go here. I'm going to paste it in the metadata JSON field here. So that's done. And finally, I'm going to click on process. So once I do that, I will get a positive response. So this is the ID of the record that got created. So insights external data object record was created, which is the header data, right? So after this is created, now we need to push the data. All right. So for that, we have to create another request. So let's go to the request number 2. Again, same. We have to paste the session ID and we have to type the give the type, which is the insights external data part as object. Part number is 1. Insights external data ID will contain the ID that we got from the first step, which is the header ID, and data file will contain the base 64 encoded version of the CSV file. Now let's open the CSV sample file that I have created. So this is my CSV sample file. And I'm going to copy this and I have to use Google again to convert CSV to base 64. This is the tool which I'm going to use. Let's do that, CSV, and we have the base 64. So I click on copy to clipboard. I go back to my SOAP UI, paste it here. No, I think I'm going to use a different one. Sorry, just give me a second. Alright, so my request is ready. We have the session ID, we have the type, we have the part number, which can be 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on the number of files you are attaching to the header. We have the ID and we have the data file. Now we are going to click on submit. So we have again got a successful response from Salesforce server. So at this point of time, nothing is happening in Salesforce Einstein Cloud, right? So if you go to your data manager and click on refresh, let's do that. So I click on refresh. I see nothing is happening yet. So no data flow has run, no file upload has run so far. So nothing is happening so far. So this means that as of now, the insights external data and the insights external data part record, they reside in the background, but they have not been started yet. All right. Okay. So now let's perform the third step, which is to close the job. So we have to perform this step. So we have to close the job. And how do we do it? We perform an update operation to insights external data. There is a field on this object called action, and we have to set the value to process. So let's do that. Okay, so I'll go to my update core API call, open the request. This is the request. I have to replace my session ID and I have to set the action to process. I have to set the ID and click on submit. All right, so my session ID has been pasted, my ID has been updated, and the action value has been set to process. So now I'm going to update the header object. So click on submit, and I got the response, which is successful. Now let's go to Salesforce and try to see if something is happening yet. Okay, so I'm going to refresh my page here, and I still see, yeah, now I see that the job is running. So you can see the job is running, which is a sample data integration, the name of the dataset that we have given in the header object, and it is successful. So this means that the job has been run, the data has been created, and now it is residing in Salesforce Einstein Analytics Cloud. So before we see what happens next, I have to again reiterate the fact that always go through this documentation. So we have two objects, insights external data and insights external data part. So insights external data is the header object where you provide the configuration value, where you provide the metadata JSON in base64 format, and you provide some other values like what is the name, label, and what is the application where the dataset is going to be stored. And insights external data part is the object where you actually provide the data, again in base64 format. And the limitation is that one record can be maximum of 10, one record could have maximum of 10 megabytes of file data, so if you have more than 10 megabytes, you'll have to split the file into multiple records, and then finally process the header. So in this example, we are only using one file which is less than 10 MB. So I created the header, I created the part object, which is the child object, and then I finally again updated the header with a value. As I said, the action field needs to be set to process so that the job can start in Salesforce. Now at this point of time, the job has been run, as you can see, and the data is in Salesforce. But if we go to Salesforce here and refresh the page again, we won't be able to see. So this is the data set that we created. So now we're going to see our our application. So this is the application. If I refresh the page, I can see the data set. It has been created here. So if I click on this, it will open a lens view where we can see we have 101 records, and that's the same number of records that we had in the CSV file. So if I click on the table mode, here we can see, here we can see that we have all the data. Query limit I'm going to change to 200 and apply, and here we can see all the records that we created. All right, yeah. So now the question comes, what happens when you want to change the data? What happens when you want to update the data? And the process is again quite straightforward. So if you go to this here, so this is my CSV data, right? So let's do one thing quickly. Okay, I'm going to change all this Norway. I'm going to change Norway to, let's say, Finland. So replace all. So everything is replaced. We have this Germany here, which is fine. I'm going to copy this line and add one more line, and I'm going to change the detail, like this becomes this. Date is fine, this is fine. Let's call it mail. Germany is again fine. The ID will be 102 and everything else will be almost the same, right? So I save this. I have saved this. Now I'm going to SOAP UI again. So I have to repeat the process, right? So I have to go to request one. Everything is same. Metadata JSON is same. So I simply click on this, submit. I'll get a new ID. And please note, I'm making an upsert operation. That's why my data is going to be replaced by the new data. So I got the header ID. Now I have to go to request to, which is my part object. Here I have to pass the data file. So I remove the existing data. I have to copy my CSV file here and go to CSV to base64 converter. Okay, and here this I copy my base64 encoded file, go to SOAP UI again, paste it here, and then again click on submit request. Oh, sorry, I have to change the ID. Sorry. So I have to change the ID of the header because we have a new header ID now, right? So I change the header ID and then I click on submit again and I got a result which is successful, right? And then the third option is the update of the header record. So this is process, and again I have to change the ID, right? And the action will be set to process and I click on submit again. Very quickly, 3 steps done. All right. Now if we go back to Salesforce, go back to data manager, refresh my page, we should see another job which must be running here. Yeah, it is still running, and I think the running will complete soon. Still running. I'm going to pause the video. Yeah, the run has been complete and we can see that the upload was successful. Now since this was an upsert operation, what we observe, or what we should observe, that the change that we made, so we replaced Norway to Finland, so which means that this ID from 93 to 99, all the records should have been updated to Finland. And then we have also added a new record which is 102 ID, right? So which is sample 102. Okay, so let's go back to my Salesforce and let's go back to this page, refresh. All right, click on this dataset again. Yeah, I opened my dataset again, and we can see that all the matching IDs were updated to Finland, and we also have a new record 102, which is Germany mail, as we expected. So since this was an upsort operation, Salesforce internally checked if there is a matching ID in the dataset, it was updated, and the new record was inserted. All right, so this is how all the integration platform works, and this is how you would design your application if you are building a client application. All right, so thank you very much, and hope to see you again. And please leave some comments and likes, and if possible, please also subscribe my channel. Thank you. Take care.